12:33, and I'll call the Sewage and Water Board Plumbing Committee meeting to order. Special counsel, please call the roll.
Director H. Davis Cole, Chair.
Here?
Director Joseph Pacho, Vice Chair.
Here.
Caitlin Timmerick. Michael Evans.
Present.
Christopher Bergeron.
Here.
Ann Wilson.
Here.
Renell Brown.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll proceed to our one action item, that is Resolution R 064-2026, amending sections 14 and 16 of the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans Plumbing Code relative to stormwater and backflow prevention. Mr. Washington will provide details on the stormwater amendments, and Ms. Hendrickson will provide details on the backflow amendment. Mr. Washington.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to discuss 16.1, the rules governing the discharge into the public storm drain system itself. And the intent behind the revisions is to obtain the enforcement authority since acquiring the jurisdiction of the small drainage as of January 1st of 2025, along with removing and adding language to improve the clarity of the regulations itself. So we're jumping to like 16.1A3B, the original language that we're trying to change is outside the levee system under the control of the Orleans Levee District. And further discussion, it just come to my attention that there's additional green infrastructure programs, projects that they're going to be doing themselves, that they're going to utilize our drainage system. So originally we wanted to delete the language, but now we're just going to keep it as is, so we don't have to do any changes to that now. As far as 16.1A4, the original language is just a definition for per to section 1.1. We don't need that anymore. We can delete that language itself. It's just a placeholder and a filler. We don't need it. Now, this is where we get to the tricky part here is 16.1B3. These are numerical limits that has been in the plumbing code for quite some time. We want to delete this language because these numerical limits, they are not enforceable. These are for wastewater treatment, not for stormwater. So we can't even meet these requirements ourselves because you don't treat stormwater. We only can do best management practices or we can do storm control measures, but that's about it for that. As it relates to 16.1C2B2, so we want to do like a swap because if you look at the original language, I, Y, and Y, they're in reverse order. And so I would love to move the third one, all construction activities less than 1 acre to the top and let it go from the least to the most restrictive. So, and the other thing we want to do is add language that's highlighted 1 acre to less than 5 acres that are not part of larger common plan of development. Reason why we want to add that because in the joint infrastructure program itself, a lot of the contractors kept saying, well, we're doing projects that are less than 5 acres, so we don't need a permit. Well, a lot of our projects are A, B, C, and D, E. So that means it's part of a larger common plan of development and they are required to have a permit by state law. Now, this is where we're going to do some more additions of the city ordinances. This is the current language. This is already in the plumbing code that's on the left-hand side. And the revisions are just adding the new ones, 54.154 all the way to 66.281.2. And the reason for doing this is to give us the additional authority of less than 36 inches of drainage pipes itself. And we also want to add the language of these city ordinances because they give us more clarity of what these actual ordinances mean. And also, the city has a fine system that we don't have. So some of these ordinances are like $5,000 up to $5,000 and lowest as $500. Right now in our current plumbing code itself, if we adopt these revisions, we're going to have to change the language from that we don't do any more than fine over $1,000. So I think by adding these new ordinances and giving the actual language to support it, it gives us the ability to not always refer back to the city ordinances. So,
So is it
So I'm thinking of it from the construction standpoint. You're talking about JIR.
Mhm.
Is it functionally $1,000 per instance
So per offense.
per fence? And we would consider each dump or each catch basin.
So some of these are for specific contaminants. So it could be hazardous waste or it could be litter, and it's per offense. So if we deemed it, it's possible. So they could get 3 of these in one setting.
Yeah,
Maybe.
because I noticed it just says dumping of specific materials
Mhm.
and it doesn't really clarify what. specific
Yeah, so
materials
the
are.
language that we're going to add to it is going to clarify the different contaminants that it's talking about specifically. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we add that language so no one can. I don't really think a lot of people are going to go look up these ordinances and like, well, you didn't tell me.
No, but functionally from our oversight of these construction projects, a lot of times it's a little bit harder to argue with contractors or for us to enforce within the contract mechanism for them to do things. We've had discussions internally that some of these things are considered optional to contractors, it seems at times, because there's no enforcement within the contract mechanism for them when they don't do certain things like BMPs. And if we can refer and find them outside of the contract, so we're finding the entity itself rather than trying to withhold money from inside the contract, it's much better
Okay.
for us as an entity. And so
Okay. You made me nervous. So like, do you want us to?
No. I like that better because it gives the managers and the engineers a little more buffer to go, no, look, it's in the code. You can't argue this. We found you doing this. The environmental enforcement they're finding you. The Sewage and Water Board as an entity is finding you not within the contract mechanism. I love that.
Yeah, and we have also enforced the regulation as it pertains right now with contractors and not following best management practices and gotten judgments. It's been several years ago, but these are very enforceable. And we're just even going further down to less than 36 inches and putting specific narratives in place, so.
I mean, I would argue that depending on what the instance is, that the fine should be greater for certain things, right? You know, a fine for a commercial business doing something that maybe was unintentional is different than a contractor tearing up a street and dumping all their sand in the street and then clogging the catch basin. It's gonna cost us far more than $1,000 to go clean out a catch basin, because
But I think we can add with the claims itself on top of it too, with the enforcement process.
claims part of it that's where it gets a
Yeah.
little.
I guess.
But usually when someone has some noncompliance, we're citing a number of codes and a number of times, and we have a fine calculator, so we're usually able to make the case for that penalty, whatever it is.
So just so I'm clear, we would be looking at, within a construction contract, within, say, the JRR program, if a contractor had 3 catch basins and they were dumping it all in there, that would be 3 separate fines per catch basin?
Yes.
Okay, and then are we able to recover the cost of the cleanup on top of the fines?
If Networks documents, if they put in CastWorks, how much time and I guess the resources that were utilized, we could add that to the enforcement costs.
I think I'd like to see that. I think that would tighten them up pretty quick.
Any more questions?
Like Chris was saying, I mean, contractors know better, but if it's some guy with a store, he didn't realize he did something,
And we've also done force accounts for the cleaning of, when it's an open canal and, and whatever the cost is, and with subcontractors and with, as Corwin said, our networks times, our time and equipment. And so we've made those cases and collected fines along those same lines.
Yeah, so ultimately, I wanted to update the plumbing code so we have the enforcement mechanisms that we needed in the authority, because we have illicit discharges. We deal with point source pollution. And if we can't determine who it is, that falls the burden of the Sewage and Water Board to remediate. So we're trying to do everything in our power to make sure that, quite frankly, we had an incident that happened last year where a contractor has literally filled a catch basin up to the rim with concrete. But I have no mechanism to truly enforce it. By adopting these revisions, I will have that, and we can move forward with the enforcement process of this and getting them to getting some help to this area because they have drainage issues because it's filled completely to the top. And based off our industrial high-risk facilities, most of these were internal within the 36 inches below. Although Sewage and Water Board was doing these type of inspections, we didn't have the authority to move forward on anything of that nature. And also, we're trying to protect Lake Pontchartrain, and the mighty Mississippi River, along with our Harper Canal and the intracoastal waterways. And by doing this, it's going to allow us, when we take these samples, basically be able to go back and do better outreach and say, hey, our goal is not to fine you. Our goal is compliance overall. So the more we have the jurisdiction and the authority to do so, I think we can tighten up on a lot of these things. And that's pretty much it for me. So special thanks to Jillian Croce and Sissy Neiman for putting a lot of this together. And I'll open it up to anybody who has additional questions.
Any more questions from Mr. Washington? All right, with that, we'll move on to Ms. Hendrickson.
I was going to say good morning, but now it's good afternoon almost. So from the backflow perspective, we are looking to add some language to the plumbing code regarding our judgment settlements in our enforcement plan. The language we are wanting to include is if a customer is issued a judgment with a fine amount, the customer has 30 days to submit a request for settlement to the SWEPNO backflow prevention section. A settlement request will be processed and approved at the discretion of SWEPNO Legal Department, Backflow Prevention Section Supervisor, and Chief of Environmental Affairs, and then a decision will be mailed to the customer. This is part of our current enforcement plan. So we just wanted to add in the language for transparency for our customers.
Okay. All right. Any questions? Seeing none, do we need to take an action on this? Okay, so it's approved to go to the full board? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the resolution R064, 2026.
So moved.
Moved by Director Pacheco, second by Mr. Bergeron?
It's okay.
Yeah. Any comments, questions? All right.
I just
Seeing,
have one
yep.
process question.
Yes.
Corwin, I think on your first point, you said we were not going to make a change. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, we can just incorporate all of that as, like, we don't need to do anything with the resolution.
Yeah, they don't, if they're not taking action, they don't need to incorporate that into the motion.
Okay. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we have one informational item for committee members, and I believe that's the revised wording for the judgments, Plumbing Code 16.1. All right, are there any public comments?
No public comment.
Okay, no public comments. No other matters. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by
Ann
Ms. Wilson.
Wilson.
Second by Director Pacheco. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are now adjourned.